Thank you so much for the kind invitation. It's wonderful to be here with you. Thanks to the organizers as well. So can I just ask real quick at the outset, how many people are from Holland in the... Okay, so a clear majority. So I want to be careful to contextualize my comments because I'm from North America. And I say that more so as a cultural statement, not necessarily a political statement, but how I view cities, how I view transportation systems, how I approach getting around cities is strongly influenced by my North American upbringing and whatnot. It's been a wonderfully gifted opportunity to begin this appointment as a professor of down at Radboud University because I'm spending more time seeing the ins and outs of the Dutch landscape, seeing the ins and outs of how the Dutch get around, and it's really fascinating, I find. So real quick, I'm going to touch on a number of issues, and I'm going to use several different metaphors, probably, and ultimately I'm going to weave three things together here for us. So the first is that we are always having aging infrastructure, okay? As soon as you lay concrete or as soon as you do something, it's going to start age. In America, we have aging infrastructure that is aging very quickly, and it's getting very bad very soon. And so the nature in which we need to reinvent our transportation system is like a hot water heater, for example. You know that it's kind of out there, you know that it's not quite, it might do what it's supposed to do, but you never really know how much longer you have. At least a lot of Americans have no idea how old their hot water heater is. So you could go out, and when it breaks, you could go out and just buy a new one at the market or whatnot, or you could think about whether or not you need a hot water heater, okay? And I think this has important implications for, as we think about the globe and our common home here, not just our individual home. And so I'm going to weave two things together here, how we get around town, and the other thing is our common town. And the aim is to bring some unity between those two elements on account of three reasons. The first is that travel is an essential activity to support economic, social, and cultural activity, okay? We know that we need to get around. All travel requires some sort of degree of energy and expenditures, but travel also plays either a uniting or sometimes a fractionalizing role in society, okay? And so what we have is an opportunity to think through all these things. Right before us, we have a design opportunity. If I could use this, the previous quote. Because just in the past couple years, we've seen technology be able to do things that we've never seen it be able to do. It can understand us, it can hear us, it can speak for us, it can get things for us, it can do almost everything that we've never really had at our fingertips as much as we have it right now. And so the world's not too far off where we're ultimately going to be kind of ordering a pizza and figuring out how we need to download it, okay? Now, this is of course, a hyperbole, but it sets up the stage where we're creating a system where traffic is dying, at least from a North American perspective. Roads will be transforming themselves, and cycling is now kind of re-emerging. So traffic is dying. So this comes from North American data, actually the United States data, and it shows the number of vehicle miles traveled, okay? And what we do here is we normalize it by population, okay? And what you see is that the number of cars that are actually moving on the road is decreasing rapidly per person over the past decade. It's at the same level it was back in 1997. There's a little bit of evidence to suggest that we're kind of on an upswing again, but you know, it's this is huge after 100 years of continual VMT growth. After almost a decade of VMT growth, definitely 80 years, you know, we're seeing this kind of element go on. But, you know, it's not so much just about how we get around town via car, and again, this is North America, this is US data, and it's how we spend our time from the American Time Use Survey, okay? And so you see that things are broken down by these different categories, how many minutes per day on average we spend in these different types of activities. And just in the past 10 years, we see that it was at 74 minutes, it's now down to 68 minutes, okay? And so you know, there's something else that's kind of going on. That's a quite significant change in just a decade after what we talk about the continual travel time budget, that people usually want to travel between 60, 70, sometimes 80 minutes every day. Now, why is this happening? Okay, so the bombings of 9/11 shocked the system. There were lots of other things going on, but depending on your socio-demographic, socio kind of perspective, I mean, we have the female workforce largely leveling out, or that's at parity now. We have other kind of major transformations happening with respect to life cycles. We have the people are working less. They're working not necessarily connected to a physical workplace, considerably less so. All these wonderful things are going on, and so I'm not sure if they're wonderful. Some of them, they're just things, shall we say. But you know, I'm not here to so much convince you that traffic's going down or that we are at the low point of something. It's just that things are behaving differently, and they're going to continue to behave differently with the onset of more technologies such as autonomous vehicles. So this is just a representation, and that's actually a number of years old actually, possibly of what's going to resemble some street scenes, possibly. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty with respect to that, and I'm not suggesting that that's in the lab of anywhere, but it's, you know, it's one way of thinking about it. Now, in addition to, and this is after six decades of technological slumber, you know, we're seeing these autonomous vehicles are going to be on the roadways. They're already on the roadways, but they're going to be on the roadways much more so in the past, in the next 4 or 5 years. Now, let's think about another element here, which is transferring it to the bike, right? Autonomous bikes. And so many of you probably saw this. It came out on April Fool's Day. But that's one element. Now, another element is we're decoupling trips from cars, okay? We're decoupling trips from cars, and we're seeing a lot more of, I mean, I'm not sure how vehicle sharing like Lyft or Uber are not prevalent in the Dutch. But, you know, in the US, I could just 3 swipes and a car can meet me outside right now and take me to anywhere I want, almost in the country. It'll just, it's just there. Uber and Lyft and all these other providers, they're really attacking the market very aggressively. So we're seeing these kind of decoupling of trips from personalized vehicles, okay? This is all to suggest that the automobile regime is showing some considerable signs of instability, okay? Prompting us to kind of question which one is the next dinosaur. Okay, now I don't want to go over-dramify things here. Cars are here. Entire countries have been designed around the car, and it's going to have a formidable role. But when you piece all these things together, you have changing demographics, you have autonomous vehicles, you have shared services, you have new vehicle types coming out, you have continued advances in IT and data. It just basically points to the same underlying picture, which is huge changes in how roads are going to be used on our futures, okay? And it's going to require some kind of rethinking. It's going to require some kind of neurons to be connected in ways that probably were not connected in the past 50, 60, 80, however many years, especially in some countries, such as America. But there's a lot that's happening. And so these are some of the ideas that my co-author and I have exposed in our book, which is only available for $8.99 on Kindle. But we basically see a future that is radically different than how most municipalities or civil servants or public officials are currently planning for them. Okay, there's a huge disconnect between what we're seeing, again, as the future of transport and how most municipalities are planning for them. And we point to the hows and whys and kind of frame the issues around this in this book. And one of the key components is that roads are going to be transforming. Now, how they're going to be transforming, that's the large unknown, okay? So I want to rewind 2 years ago when I had an opportunity to serve as a Fulbright scholar in Bologna. And I was living in Bologna with my family for the entire year. Now this, many of you have probably been to Bologna. It's a wonderfully charming city, but they have a road there, and that road is the road on which we lived, the very road on which we lived for an entire year, was called the Via Emilia, okay? And here I am with my 10-year-old son, 8-year-old son, and this road was laid in 187 BC. 187 BC is when that road was created. And it's endured many, many different transformations, obviously, from a technological standpoint. And last summer, we had the fortune of going back, and it was really cool because you saw that the main road, so you see that tower in the back here, that's the same tower that is here from the other perspective, shooting. And so this road was going over a major reconstruction. The Italian crisis had finally hit, and the buses could really no longer go on those cobblestone streets. So they had to repave it. But as part of the repaving process, they uncovered all the layers of history, and you see some of these actual ruts from, they identified the stones back to the Euganean hills from, first century, and they identified some of these ruts, obviously to the chariots and whatnot. So, but the point here is that these roads transform themselves. Now, Italians they're a very inventive culture, but when it comes to culture, I think they are a very inventive society. There's many ingenious innovators that came from Italy. I think Da Vinci, for example. But as a culture, they're not one huge to innovate. They've kind of been stuck in their ways. But what they did here is that they extended the sidewalk for, just a meter more on each side, which I thought was kind of an interesting, they're finally recognizing that, the pedestrian area is so rich here, but they still want to protect their motorization of the buses and whatnot. It's a huge bus route. But the fact is that they changed. Now, that was just one example of how change and roadway space and culture kind of intermix. What we're often seeing in other kind of societies, Holland or North America, is this future of many different types of modes. Some of them are going to be small, long haul. Some of them are going to be short haul. Some of them it's going to function as a seamless transition between all these different types of this is going to be good for my trip now. That's going to be good for my trip then, type thing. Smaller cars, battery powered, et cetera, et cetera. But trying to understand how to put that transformation in the context of roads, this is the standard cross-section of, I don't know, you name it, city USA, Memphis, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, many cities have this type of landscape. And so, we're trying to retrofit these things in the ways that the Dutch do, of course. Now, this is a concept that's been around for 30 years. We've been talking about doing this for 30 years, and finally some cities are catching on. But really what to do and how to position the bicycle is front and center in a lot of these discussions. And I find that interesting because it's never before seemed to, back in the 1920s, it was this kind of wonderful hero of a movement that, provided women, liberation for the first time, at least in North America. And so we're seeing it now kind of recycle through almost 100 years ago, 100 years later, as having this kind of heroistic quality. And I find myself wondering, does it really have that heroistic quality as much as we think that it does? Okay? And so, obviously the Dutch are one of the top two. Oh, I guess I'm not speaking to many Danes here. The Dutch are the top bicycling nation in the country, in the world, right? And so obviously they have some kind of important ingredients to bring to bear on these discussions. But they also have some huge challenges. And where and why and how certain cities are positioned in view of their cycling kind of machoism or culture or whatnot across the landscape, I find really fascinating. And at least 3 challenges are really going to be putting the Dutch spotlight on the Dutch scene in the foreseeable years. The first is mixing with autonomous vehicles. Okay, the Dutch are a very inventive culture. I'm sure that you're going to be one of the leaders to the race of trying to put autonomous vehicles on the road, along with Google and others. But how the bikes are going to mix with these autonomous vehicles is going to be a big thing. And autonomous vehicles are probably going to be on the outside first, less on the inside of the streets. But that's going to inside insides of cities, for example. But that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is how bikes are going to mix with other bikes, primarily of the motorized variety. You see them on the bike paths now. And it's fascinating to see these, some of which are legal, others are not legal. It's fascinating to see how they are tolerated or not tolerated sometimes. And also these motor scooters, particularly on the Dutch, in the Dutch system, from an outsider's perspective, it's very interesting to see the kind of class hierarchy element going on here. And so, but that's going to be a second kind of huge challenge. And then the third is, well, basically has to do with the second has to do with the electrification of these things. Did I mess? Yeah, the electrification. So bikes are, bikes have been bikes for a very long time, but now increasingly they have this kind of motorized element to this. So you can see the battery, which is part of that. And electronic bike sales are they're going through the roof. They're going through the roof, and they're going to be becoming more so. And so your bikes are going to really start to get a little bit more amped up owing to smaller batteries. So some markets across the globe have been quicker to uptake in this, the Asia Pacifics, but the Dutch appear to be right there, and I know the Swiss and the Germans are as well. They're providing increased amplification for particularly the elderly, which has an important element about designing for the elderly or aging in place or designing for the aging. So that's the second huge challenge. And the third challenge I see is how you're mixing with your trains. How we're mixing with their trains, I mean, wow, it's interesting. How many bikes are at these train stations and how this works out and the Dutch way, relative to the Dane way, et cetera. But, you got a major parking issue going on in most of these train stations, and you can't keep up with the demand in many of these train stations with respect. I'm thinking of the Utrechts, I'm thinking of the Delfts, I'm thinking of the, even here. Anyway, so you have these three challenges, but you have this thing, which is a bike, and which provides such an elegant solution to a complex problem here of how we design our cities. But to further drill down into that, I need to define by what I mean by a bike, okay? And so it has important implications for, I think, the role and the definition of cycling and how we're going to plan for that in city streets. So it's basically a two-wheeled vehicle that has a minor pedal assist capability, and the way I define it that way is because else it doesn't have its kind of heroistic quality that people are so looking for it to have. And what do I mean by that? So it's an elegant solution to a very complex problem, and I can't help but to think that we have these things that are increasingly on a continuum between bikes and cars. So, bikes are becoming more car-like, and cars are becoming more bike-like with respect to motorization, with respect to safety, with respect to other kind of elements. And so where we fall on that continuum is very important. And so, the motor scooter falls right in the middle, for example. A, smart car falls a little bit to the right. Other cars are becoming, big cars are becoming smaller, et cetera, et cetera. So where is this with respect to kind of a natural evolution? And so I think that there are some evolutionary qualities to this. I keep wondering about, are we just on the next peak of some sort of technological breakthrough, and then we're going to revert back to something else? I don't know. But the point here is that the situation that we're in right now, with respect to issues of loneliness, the situation as a society, and I think that that's relatively universal, at least in the U.S., with respect to how we're driving less or using cars a little bit less, with respect to issues of health, we have a design opportunity to address many different types of solutions with a particular element, okay? And so first of all, the bike stewards the environment. And we've been hearing about that for 20 or 30 years, how it's, it's the most efficient, it requires very little, external or extractable resources, et cetera, et cetera. That's only gone so far in terms of the advocacy. The second is it ensures efficiency, and it's cheap. It sometimes allows us not to have a second car if we so choose. But those have been around for a very long time. What's new and what's a little bit more different, though, is the spotlight that is on the solution that it provides with these other two issues. The bike, kind of arguably having a maximum speed of 35, 40 kilometers per hour, and I would put that as kind of a threshold. That speed still allows you to facially recognize, somebody else on the street. Whether or not you make eye contact with them or not, that's another thing that we'll hear from Dr. Outen at 4:30 about. But the facial recognition that the bicycle allows, I think, has an important intrinsic quality to it. And not being kind of encapsulated has some intrinsic qualities to it. So having that upper speed be somewhere between 35 and 40 kilometers per hour, not much faster than that. But that's also because of the stimulus or the motivation from a kind of metabolic standpoint, okay? And it's this having to see people work, having to have the legs be in motion. That's what provides some kind of metabolic benefits of cycling, not necessarily the throttle. And furthermore, from an aging in place or a design for health or design for aging perspective, it's the herky-jerkiness of the throttles that are creating a lot of the electric bike crashes for the elderly. So actually allowing them to pedal through these processes provides an additional benefit. At any rate, so these four solutions or means by which the bike provides a solution, two of them are relatively new, have some important kind of new foresight or new elements here. But not so much here in Holland, and I'm only going to go off onto this for 2 or 3 minutes because we had at least 2 other speakers here from North America. And I want to put it in a different context in that respect. But the real clashes that are going on between modes, some of which were referenced in the New York presentation, they're real. They're real, and people have a very strong sense of possession over their right-of-way. And it's very culturally defined. And so what we're seeing here is that different places are on different levels of the continuum for trying to innovate and trying to think creatively about that. So I come from Boulder, Colorado, which, we do this silly thing. We're American. We love to rate our cities by different bronze levels. So we're a platinum bike city, and we're one of only 4 platinum bike cities in the country. We have a whopping mode split of 6%, 8%, I believe, something like that. It's bike friendly. It's a great town, but it's not anything close to what you have in the Netherlands. At any rate, so what did they recently do? Last year, they decided that they were deficient in their bike capacity, they being the city planners and political officials, and they closed down a 3-kilometer stretch, a north-south corridor, to a roadway. They took a lane away, okay? And I'm going to just, this is a direct contradiction to what you suggested, just to be forthright about that, where, nothing happened. Okay, so what happened is it was a 3-kilometer stretch, and all hell broke loose in the town. It was crazy. You couldn't pick up a newspaper for the next 4 weeks without having some sort of headline about how the impacts are of closing down this lane to traffic and turning it over to bikes. People's left turns, their left turns actually increased by 6.4 seconds, for example, in their commute. And so after a 9-week, they spent $250,000 to create this kind of transformation. After 9 weeks, what did they do? The city council decided to basically reverse the whole project. And so they tore it up, and it's now 4 lanes of auto traffic. So this wonderful, innovative experiment just basically got eaten up by the public and the press. It just got eaten up alive in arguably the most progressive bicycling town in the US. It just got chewed up and spit out. So obviously we're not ready to think that creatively or innovatively about these things as much as we have thought that we are. Now, I do agree that the bicycling has these intrinsic powers, but it's going to be a long sell for a lot of communities to continue to kind of harbor these things. And so the matter of how we're designing streets for which users going forth, there's a lot to learn from the Dutch. There's an extreme amount to learn from the Dutch. And it has as much to do with sharing the street space as it does with the bicycling's kind of superiority. And so I want to close with this video, which is a reflection of, again, living in Italy for the year with my 8-year-old son, where, you know, as an advocate, it was important for him to bike around. We biked around our city, and but I showed these videos of him biking around the streets of Bologna, and everyone just, they say, what a terrible parent you are. How could you ever allow yourself to do that? And so what you see here is kind of double speed. And, you know, it is a somewhat kind of hostile environment from a cycling perspective. I mean, I get it. They say I'd be locked up behind key for child protective services and whatnot. But what you see here is that you have this kind of dance going on, and you have, you know, smaller vehicles mixing with larger vehicles. You have people actually respecting each other with respect to their eye contact. You have other elements of just this kind of chaotic atmosphere just kind of working together, okay? And nobody really gets hurt that much. You know, not that many people actually get killed in these things. But it's this degree of chaos, which is, frankly, I see chaos outside here in the main squares in Groningen. It's this kind of comfortableness with chaos. And that's going to be an important element kind of moving forward, where the Dutch can just kind of thrive, because most other cultures are very uncomfortable with the degree of chaos that you see outside in your intersections, particularly here in Groningen. So, what we see here is that traffic's dying, roads will be transforming, probably across different cultures, and cycling is trying to reemerge as this kind of hero or additional role. So in closing here, as we kind of continue to think of whatever metaphor you want, reinventing the city or creating a new hot water heater, I would claim that, you know, that's one way to think about it. But in closing, you know, coming forth with a truly sustainable transportation system that is representative for cities globally, that future might be closer than we think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Krizek. First, the audience, someone who has a question. Well, if you don't have, I have many again. But I won't take too many minutes from the break. This last part of your story about this reversal of this idea in Boulder. Well, it's clear that if you want to support this transformation, you need much support of the press, of the public, of political support, because all these good initiatives will be drawn back if that is not there. Mm-hmm. How should we do that?
Well, it's interesting because there were, in this particular case, and I don't want to dwell on this particular case too much, but it can be, the return or the reversal of it can be attributed back to two factors. The first is that there was a city council person who was just wanted to see this thing go away. And they were relentless in making sure that that was going to happen. And so it turned into a re-election issue because it was released, the project was released 4 months before another major re-election. So that was kind of mistake number one, to be going back, to be so aggressively changing the street in a way that they haven't done in the previous 20 or 30 years. I mean, it's interesting because you mentioned 97 in Vancouver. 95 was the plan from Boulder, which said that they don't want to increase road capacity. And so that was kind of the plan from a North American perspective that put Boulder on the map with respect to not increasing road capacity. Have they really held true to their promises? You know, it's like the dirty secret of Danish. You know, they keep saying that they're taking 2 or 3% of parking out of Copenhagen every year since 1967. The dirty secret is that they're putting another 1.5% of that parking underground as they do it. It's not always just going away, going kapoof. Anyway, so you have these things going on with the politics, but you also have the other person that really wanted to see this go away was the editor of the newspaper. He really wanted to see this go away. And he made it a point to make it a huge issue every opportunity he got. And so the planning department realizes that they were kind of caught on their heels about how to respond to the inquiries coming from the press.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gordon Price, maybe do you have an idea how to deal with such an editor?
Well, timing. You're right about the election. That's deadly. Secondly, you'd have to have the political will that has sustaining power. If indeed, I'd like to know more about the data. If there really wasn't any significant consequence, then you've got to get past that point until there's a new readjustment period. But I should say, in '96, I was the councillor who really pushed for taking a lane from the Burrard Bridge. It blew up in a week. We reversed it. It had to be revisited in 10 years. It was successful. It was a different council. It was a different mood, but we had the same editorials. We had the same shock jocks. We had the same blowback. Council stuck with it. Now it would be untouchable. So you've got to get past that peak, and you'll see the reverse effect. The people who complain will disappear, and those who will support it will be the ones who will fight you if you try and change it.
Hold on.
Well, from a North American perspective, we often say that, you know, and this is a testament to Gordon here, everybody's just taking a page out of, say, Seattle's playbook. Well, Seattle's taking a page out of Portland's playbook. Portland's taking a page out of Vancouver's playbook. Everybody's coming back to, from a North American perspective, of what's going on in Vancouver in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I will end up this session. Thank you for your attention. We have a short break till 3:30. And if you would like to come back, you're very welcome.